Welcome to the City Council meeting of Wednesday, April 16th, 2014. Can I have the roll call, please?
Salem Derby.
Present.
Dan Hagan.
Present.
Jennifer Hayes. Present. J.P. Krasinski.
Here.
Joseph McCoy.
Here.
Dan Rist.
Here.
Tamara Smith.
Here.
Joy Winnie.
Here.
Nathan Ziegler.
Present.
Okay, can we all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge of Allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I have a motion for the approval of the minutes of April 2nd,
So moved.
2014.
Second.
Motion and a second for the approval of the minutes. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions? One abstention. Well, okay, motion passes. Public speak time. If there's anyone here from the public who would like to address the council concerning something other than that's on our public hearings tonight, please feel free to come to the podium and state your name and address. Okay, not seeing any. Moving on, communications, village officials, boards and committees. Councilor Rist, I don't believe we have anything.
No, we do not have anything.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Communications, Mayor Cadger.
Good evening. As you see in front of you is the fiscal 2015 budget, and it is in the total amount of $37,305,539.52. It's presented to the City Council for your approval and also to the residents of the City of Easthampton. Despite the limitations and challenges that insufficient state funding, along with unfunded mandates, continues to have on all our city departments, you have before you a balanced budget. We will continue to work as a unified team to provide services to our residents to the best of our ability. In the meantime, we will aggressively pursue every avenue for additional funding and cost-saving measures, and we look forward to better economic times in the future. Our budget priorities are and will remain with education, public safety, public works, senior services, community development, culture, and recreation. We continue to surpass the net school spending requirements. This year, it is estimated that our net school contribution will exceed the state required amount by $845,054.05, which demonstrates our continued support for education to our students. I am honored and proud to work with such a dedicated, professional, and talented group of city employees, and I greatly appreciate the understanding and cooperation that they have provided. I would especially like to acknowledge our Director of Finance, Melissa Zawatsky, and the many hours spent laboring over this budget. Her assistance and dedication during this preparation have been invaluable to me. And a complete copy of this budget is available in the City Clerk's office, the Office of the Mayor, and the library. And I look forward to working with the councilors and the Finance Committee to discuss the budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Hagan.
I'd like to make a motion that the City Council, the municipal budget FY15, just presented by the mayor, be moved to the Finance Subcommittee.
Second.
Motion and second to move the FY 2015 municipal budget to Finance Subcommittee. Any additional discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Move on to Rules Government Committees. Rules and Government Relations, Councilor Rist.
No report this evening, Mr. President.
Hagan, Finance, Councilor Hagan.
Numerous items here.
I know.
First, our next meeting will be next Wednesday, April 23rd at 6 p.m. in Room 1. I would like to just give a thank you to Council President McCoy for filling in at the last Finance Subcommittee under Rule 2 and 11. It was one of those rare circumstances after the meeting was said, two councilors had something come up in an emergency nature, and Councilor McCoy was good enough to fill in so that we could keep moving our finance items forward. With that, I'd like to set several public hearings for next week. I would like to read them all and then make one motion. They will all be set for the May 7th, 2014 meeting. The first would be an interdepartmental transfer of $11,700 for repairs to the fire department ladder and number 1 engine. $28,000 supplemental appropriation to water capital purchase for a 4x2 pickup truck. $75,000 to water capital purchase for meter replacement. $10,000 to fund the capital expense of an NPDES permit requirement, $15,000 to replace the gravity thickener pump at the wastewater treatment plant, and finally $60,000 for pump station improvements. Again, all on May 15th. I make that in the form of a motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for the 5 previously read supplemental appropriations.
There were 6.
No,
Five
you're right.
supplementals and one inter.
And 1 interdepartmental. Any additional discussions? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstained, motion passes.
Also on our agenda is 2 items tonight for public hearings, which we will discuss. And at our next finance meeting, we are also going to take up a CPA funding request for historical records. There is 1 item of new business, which we'll take care of later, but that's it at this time for finance.
Okay, thank you. Public Safety, Counselor Hayes.
Hi, thank you. Our next Public Safety Subcommittee meeting will be at 6 p.m. on Tuesday, the 29th, room to be determined. We have 3 agenda items for that meeting. We'll be discussing the Highland Ave, Northampton Street stoplight intersection. We'll be looking at the acceptance of Willow Circle and Autumn Drives. And we're also going to begin the discussion of street acceptances protocol to see if we can make that a little bit more efficient. And I'd like to make a motion for a 60-day extension on the Willow and Autumn Drive street acceptances.
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second for the 60-day extension for Willow Circle and Autumn Drive.
Mr.
Counselor Rist.
President, they're on the public hearing agenda, so I believe we should continue that public hearing when we get to them.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, obviously.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we're not taking them up this evening?
No.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes.
Thus concludes.
Thank you very much. Appointments, Counselor Winnie.
Thank you. I have no report tonight. Thank you very much.
Okay. Ordinance, Counselor Derby.
Thank you, Mr. President. The ordinance subcommittee met Thursday, April 3rd, and former Councilor Cobb was nice enough to grace us with his presence, where we talked about Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2002. And, you know, we discussed it, and we planned some action steps, and we are going to continue to review and look at that. So that's not something that's going to be coming up in the near future. It's going to take a little time. There's going to be some ordinance writing that's probably going to have to result from that, but I just wanted to give everybody an update that we are working towards it.
Okay.
That concludes my report.
Thank you. Property, Counselor Ziegler.
Okay, we also met back on April 3rd and discussed the disposal of the Parsons Street property and also the easements which are on tonight's public hearing. We also had the opportunity today to do a walkthrough on the Parsons Street School, and there were a number of community members who joined us, and I think there was a lot of enthusiasm for the building and, again, the potential for what it may be and the grounds, so that was a lot of positives. I know personally I was a little disappointed in the condition that it was left. There's a lot of trash, to say the least, within the building, other things that I thought could have been recycled, but beyond that, again, it was a nice opportunity for community members and for the council to see the building and grounds today. So I would like to set our next property meeting, which would be for Thursday, April 24th at 6 p.m. Meeting room to be determined. And our second agenda item is, as I said, the easements for the Pleasant Street Mills infrastructure project, and that is open for a public hearing tonight.
Okay.
That concludes.
Okay, thank you very much. We have no old business, so we can move on to new business. Counselor Rist.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion, because we can do this in one evening, to approve this donation account. And the motion will read as follows: pursuant to the provisions of Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53A, approval is hereby given to establish an account to receive donations for the Easthampton Development Industrial Committee. I make that motion this evening, the 16th day of April. This was approved by the mayor. It's an EDIC that well, I should get a second on that motion.
Second.
Okay, motion and second.
And apparently, as we can read, it's an EDIC gift account creation, and I think it's great that we have it.
Yeah, as I read the back of where it came from is from the city cleanup day, and that, you know, they get everyone, we have bags and rakes, and so there is some expense that has been accrued to the EDIC during that, and so there were requests to be able to make donations, and so obviously it made sense to create a donation account so to help fund for some of those cleanup days and other events. Any other comments or discussion on the creation of the account? Let's see. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion passes. Councilor Hagan.
There's one item of new business that I will request to be moved to finance, but I'll do a first reading. To the interdepartmental transfer dated April 10th. The request is hereby made for approval of the following appropriation. The amount requested is $7,000 to be transferred from street lights, light power, in that amount $7,000, and transferred to building operation technical services $7,000. The amount requested will be used for the following purpose: to provide funds for a shortfall in the miscellaneous technical services.
Is there a second on that?
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second to move the $7,000 interdepartmental transfer to finance. Any additional discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion passes. Councilor Derby, I believe you have some new
Thank you,
business
Mr.
for us.
President. At the property meeting on April 3rd, the property committee discussed looking at the zoning for the Parsons Street School, and it was suggested by the property committee 3-0 that the ordinance committee take up reviewing the zoning of the Parsons Street School. So, in the form of a motion, I would like to move the discussion of rezoning the Parsons Street School parcel to the ordinance subcommittee.
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second to move to ordinance subcommittee the discussion relating to the zoning of the Parsons Street School property. Any additional discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion passes.
Mr. President,
Councilor Rist.
I think I'd request some paperwork to this effect.
Remember, this is just a discussion. So,
So if you're going to recommend it, you're going to provide us with an...
Yes.
all right, 'cause
so this allows the committee to talk about.
And if it's approved, then it'll go to planning and everything in a
Exactly.
normal procedure. I mean, if you think it should be written.
Yes.
Thank you, sorry.
No problem. Okay, I think we're probably close enough. I can start some of the public hearing. I'll take a motion to open the public hearing.
Second.
Motion and second to open public hearing. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes. I'm going to change the order a little bit tonight related to the request to accept Willow Circle and Autumn Drive as public ways. The subcommittee wasn't able to get together to vote. Problems that came up on that topic, and I would like to have, obviously, a subcommittee recommendation before we head to a public hearing. So because of that, we're going to continue this public hearing. So in the form of a motion, I would like to ask for a continuation of the public hearing for the request to accept Willow Circle and Autumn Drive to May 7th, 6:15 p.m. in these chambers.
So moved.
A second, yeah. Okay. So a motion, a second to continue the public hearing on Willow and Circle and Autumn Drive. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion passes.
Is
Yes.
there somebody here for the public that did come for that meeting that would like to?
Thank you very much. Is there
welcome.
anyone here who came from the public to comment on the Autumn Drive Willow Circle? Did you, sir?
I'm sorry, what was your question?
The Autumn Drive Willow Circle, is that the topic? No, okay. Okay, thank you for correcting me on that, Councilor Bennett. It's in too much of a hurry. Okay, so now that is completed, we can move on to the next public hearing, which would be supplemental appropriations, so Councilor Hagan.
Our first public hearing tonight involving finance is a supplemental appropriation, and before we take any possible audience input, I'd like to do a second reading. It's a supplemental appropriation request from March 11th. Request is hereby made for approval of the following appropriation. The amount requested is $55,000. It's to be appropriated from free cash in that amount, $55,000, and appropriated to veterans' benefits. The amount requested be used for the following purpose: to provide funds for a shortfall in veterans' assistance. I don't know if anyone's here from the public.
Yes, if there's anyone here from the public who would like to address the $55,000 appropriation from free cash to provide for a shortfall in veterans benefit assistance, please come to the podium and state your name. Not seeing any. Councilor Hagan?
This was an item that was brought forth to the subcommittee. Mr. John O'Connor, Director of Veteran Services, came before the committee, and he said it's a result of two things, added expense and an increased number of veterans that are in need of services. I think Mr. O'Connor said they try to be judicious in their spending. It's just that the additional amount of veterans that have come forward and the expenses and what their need is just grown this year. And it was approved 3-0 by the subcommittee. I don't know if either of the other subcommittee members would like to comment.
Councilor Rist?
It's an obvious need, but if I'm correct, Councilor Hagan, 75% of this appropriation is reimbursed.
That's correct, by the state.
After the fact.
After
You have
the
to put it up front.
Right, exactly.
Okay, that's good to know. Any other comments from councilors? No. Anyone, Mayor or Finance Director, any comments, or are you all set? Okay. Okay, Councilor Hagan, I'll accept a
I'll make
motion.
the following motion, that the council approve the supplemental appropriation in the amount of $55,000 to be appropriated from free cash and appropriated to veterans benefits, $55,000 to provide funds for a shortfall in veterans assistance.
Second. A motion, a second, for the supplemental appropriation of $55,000 from free cash to veterans benefits. Any additional discussion from the councilors? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes.
Our second public hearing involving finance is a bonding and borrowing request. I'll do a second reading on that one also. It's dated February 27th to Mayor Cadger. Request is hereby made for the following bonding and borrowing. The amount requested is $1,100,000 to be funded by enterprise and to be borrowed or bonded for an integrated water resource management plan. And again, I don't know if anyone from the public
Okay.
wants to...
Let me start with, is anyone from the city, either the mayor, would you like to start, make a comment on this?
Well, I don't have any comments, but we're here to answer. I don't have any specific comments, but we're here to answer. Melissa and I are here to answer any questions that you might have. As you know, Joe Paczynski, the director, is at a public meeting, public hearing at the same time for the Board of Public Works, right downstairs in Conference Room 1. So he was, at the Finance Committee, and I think, Dan can probably take it from there.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to speak more or public?
Oh, if there's anyone else from the public.
So is there anyone here from the public who would like to address the council concerning the $1,100,000 appropriation? Sir, is that what you came here for?
I wanted to understand what it was.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
As the mayor said, at the at the Finance Subcommittee, Director Paczynski was present along with the engineering firm or two engineering firms that would be involved in this project, along with the two other subcommittee members and the mayor and the finance director, at which time it was explained that this is a need to develop a comprehensive plan for all our water, the sewer, the wastewater, and the stormwater. It's a comprehensive package. The need for it is to really take a look at our whole water system and prioritize what may or may not be needed in the future for repair, and also to comply, and this is kind of the important part, is to comply with EPA and DPA regulations that are coming. And if we don't put this in place and have it in place, it would make funding of any possible new work either possibly not getting some type of grants, or more likely not qualifying for lower interest loans. And I know the finance director can speak a little bit to that if you would like.
It's important.
So the way that this loan is structured is so that we have the ability to borrow from the Water Pollution Abatement Trust if we choose. We don't have to use their they're borrowing, but if we do this vote this way, then we can use the Water Pollution Abatement Trust to fund this project. And then if we go through this process, we can use the Water Pollution Abatement Trust for future projects that are sort of moved up in our schedule because of new regulations. The benefit to that is that the trust currently does loans at 2% plus an administrative fee, which in this market is about comparable to what we can get on our own. However, most of the grant funding or relief funding through the federal government runs through that program. So how we were eligible for our monies when we did the sewer project on Line Street was because we were participating through the trust and the SRF program. So we don't want to not make ourselves eligible through that program. And the study makes us comply with how they want us to look at future projects. And I forget what else you asked me.
Any comments for the finance director? Or?
Yeah.
Councilor Rist, I guess, if you have a question.
You want to say something else, Melissa?
Well, she was just reminding us that the trust is done in phases, and you borrow the amount that the project costs, not the full amount of the authorization, just like any other borrowing. We can borrow up to 1.1 million. If the project should come under 1.1 million, then we would only borrow the amount it costs to do this work.
As you stated, or as Joe stated at the meeting, if this is practical to do, because if we prioritize all the projects that may come out of this study, whether it be wastewater treatment plant projects or water lines, we have a lot of water lines that are very old, etc. The prioritization of that and having this study done ahead of time, which as I understand take about 1.5 years to do, would make us much more eligible for the water borrowing that you just mentioned, the water, I forget, the Water Resource Management or whatever that agency is. That's
Right.
correct, right?
And yeah, and I did recently go to a conference, a municipal conference in Easthampton, and I sat in on the Water Commission's report, and they are looking that through the SRF program or the Water Pollution Abatement Trust program is something that they're trying to pass through now to finance a lot of the infrastructure that many Massachusetts cities and towns have under the ground, let's say, that the commission that was developed to study that on a state level and then sort of send best practices back to the communities wants to incentivize certain types of planning and or changes to the infrastructure or improvements to the infrastructure, so that they were hoping, although it's not done yet, that some of those improvements to infrastructure would be at zero rate, and that would have to be done through that program.
In other words, by doing this, we are setting ourselves up to be eligible for these zero-rate possible bonding
Right,
plus
nothing-
grants.
nothing
There's no
guaranteed.
guarantee, but we could do it.
Right, but if we didn't go through this process and follow the procedure that the Water Commission would like us to, then we sort of exclude ourselves from that.
Right, and then as soon as we get a mandate, we'd have to pay for a study anyway to find out what that project would cost. So it's
and-
very practical to do this.
And the
as Joe
study
said.
would be piecemeal to the situation that came up versus a
broad look.
A broad overlook of our entire system. And when Joe and I talked this afternoon, he did remind me that we have a lot of institutional knowledge in our DPW department, and between Jim Gracia, Tom Newton, and Joe, there's 90 years of Easthampton municipal experience.
They know where
that-
everybody's buried.
Well-
Water, I mean.
Water lines are. And so
The water lines is what I meant to say.
Yeah. And so the truth is that, you know, if they each have approximately 30 years of service, then they're all close to retirement, and that walks away with them.
Yes,
And it would
that's
be
true.
nice to have that looked at while they're still here, while we can still pick their brains as to, you know,
Very good point. Last thing, $70,000 was your estimate the cost of
It's
this to
slightly
be
under
borne
70.
by the water rate and sewer rates, correct?
to be borne by the water and sewer rates, yes.
And they're determining that as we speak.
That and some other projects, yes.
Counselor Wynn.
So, this is basically going to be what I'm getting out of it is a very intense, accurate reading of basically where our water lines, our main water lines are, our main sewer lines are, the date that our equipment and capital equipment and things like that were brought online, and then...
This is not about the trucks, it's about the...
No, not trucks.
Yeah.
I'm talking about like the wastewater treatment plant, our water treatment plant on Hendrick Street. They would look at all of this comprehensively and say, all right, so this was brought online at this date, so our recommendations are to follow in line with the federal guidelines that this, and this be replaced on this time schedule type of thing?
I don't think
or-
it's so much as the age of it, but how it functions and how that function complies with or doesn't comply with new regulations that we
Okay.
know are coming. So
Okay.
is our system set up to deal with a new DEP reg? And if not, when does that roll out? Therefore, we need to look at this time. And how does that interact with another system? Like, how does the stormwater interact with sewer, and how does wastewater interact with our aquifer, and just sort of how does the system work together, and what is changing in the way that we should manage all of our water uses, both clean and wastewater.
Okay.
Okay, I'll go for. So is this review strictly related to how these lines and such relate to regulations, or is some of this review about which lines may be in most need of repair or most likely
Well, I think the repair
will tie into?
it will tie into it, because if the water line is in need of repair, then it causes a problem that will have a regulation around you. You're
Regulatory.
not allowed to dump water into the ground
Yeah.
or have a big hole, and it speaks to the overall sustainability of our system. If we've got a big break somewhere, the whole system starts to back up a little bit, and you want to be able to sort of identify, cut that off, fix the problem, and move on. And so if you know that that these lines are older and you think there might be leaking, not pouring out like we had in the plains, but leaking in this section, then you would look at to address that earlier rather than later. Not it's 100 years old, so replace it first, but water seems to be flowing through at a different rate than the other one. Is there a problem somewhere?
Okay.
So it's looking at the problems and how they all fit together, and if there's a problem with the fitting also, and is there a better way when we fix it to stave off problems in the future.
Okay, Councilor Hagan.
Just a couple of, I know you mentioned stormwater, but I think that is also a big part of this, because I know stormwater is something that's, if you look at some of the surrounding communities, a lot of other communities have gone to specific stormwater fees.
Right, because-
this will all incorporate a study of how our stormwater
Right.
is moved also.
It's not specific to stormwater, but stormwater is the current regulation that is coming,
That's
that we
coming.
need to be prepared for. It's the most urgent one, but there's probably 3 or 4 right after that we don't need to wait until the last minute to look at.
And my final comment is, I just wanted to say that the subcommittee members were very pointed in their talk to the engineers, wanting to know exactly why the cost of this project is what it is, and the engineers were very forthcoming, I thought, in trying to explain the cost of how they had to follow the lines and stuff, and maybe the other council of this.
I wanted to follow up on that, because I was impressed with the fact that the engineers made it clear that this would be extremely comprehensive. They're going to get down with x-rays and look at every pipe, look at all the sewer lines, and make sure of their condition of the system as it applies to the whole picture and what we may be facing for the future, and then prioritizing the projects. But I don't want to alarm everybody, except to say that this is just the beginning of an infrastructure battle we're going to have to deal with, because we have a lot of older situations involved in the water system, and this is $1.5 million for a study. The projects alone may cost quite a bit in the future. The study allows us to at least target the most pressing ones right now. So they convinced us that this was the way to go, especially with the idea of getting the lower rates and maybe grants for bonding through this program, which if we didn't have the study would be very difficult to achieve. So it's practical and it's fiscally wise to do it.
Okay. Any additional questions for the finance director?
Not for the director, but I just wanted to mention that at the subcommittee level, we talked about that we might not use all of the funds.
Right.
And that was very important to me because frankly, I was appalled that a study would cost $1.1 million. That just sounded like a lot of money. And it is. But we're doing a lot with that money, and it certainly was justified to us at the subcommittee level. And also the hope that we wouldn't spend all that money, and that we were using not just one engineering firm, but two engineering firms, one with an expertise with water and another with expertise with sewers and stormwater, so that we were taking advantage of all the expertise in the least expensive manner. I think it's something we have to do for the future, because as Rich was saying, we're looking at somewhere between $50 and $100 million worth of infrastructure that we have. We want to see it be preserved as best as possible, and taking this step is the right move to help preserve it.
Okay. Is there anyone else from the public? I'm sorry, gentlemen, if we have our city planner come up first. I saw her hand go up first, if you don't mind. If you just state your name and address for the records, please.
Jessica Allen, City Planner. I just want to also remind you of how valuable a document like this is to other city departments. As you know, we apply for funding under Community Development Block Grant funding. We have a MassWorks project right now, which is an infrastructure project that we rely on the institutional knowledge at DPW to help guide us in what projects make the most sense infrastructure-wise when we're looking at future CDBG projects, when we're talking about economic development in terms of infrastructure like the MassWorks program, and that a document like this will help guide us in terms of future grant writing for those programs, so that we understand what's a priority, and when Jim, Joe, and Tom all decide to retire, that we still have a guidance document to help us with those grants. So I just wanted to make note of that.
Great, thank you. Sir, would you like to come up and make a comment? If you could just state your name, address for the record, please.
Like I said, my name, by the way, is Norman Roy, 359 Main Street, Unit 1A. I live in a condominium on Main Street. And my questions, I'm trying to really understand what this is all about. But I guess the question that I have is, where does the funding for the 1.1 million come from? Is that from the enterprise? So that means higher rates for our water, and because right now we're already paying sewer fees for our irrigation system, and it happens to be 65% of our water bill, and our irrigation system is metered, and the water never goes to sewer, but we're getting charged a sewer fee, a big one. So I wanted to know where the funding would be coming.
Yeah, it is coming from the enterprise fund, and I think as Councilor Riss made mention, it will eventually come from probably an increase in fees. They're talking at public, I believe the Board of Public Works is meeting this evening at the same time to discuss rates. And I know you've been before the council before about your, and again,
Right.
I understand your plight, but it will be coming from the enterprise fund.
So the funding is actually going to come from higher rates?
Water and sewer rates, or water and sewer funding,
Okay.
Again, how much that would be is not determined yet. That would be determined, what the increase would be hasn't been determined yet. But it would definitely come from that
And my
source
other
of fund.
question is, as this goes forward, what are we talking about? More resources? Adding more people to do the job? Projects and plans often mean additional people, engineers, whatever. Is that going to be additional funding that's going to be needed beyond this 1.1?
I don't think, and I can't speak for the Public Works Director, but I don't believe he ever felt that, or never expressed to us any thing that he would add personnel. It was more to identify possible projects, and obviously if a project comes along, then there's additional funding to mitigate that problem or that line or whatever, but that would be done like any other project, either
So
what could be done by his people, or if needed, outside resources.
So again, that would affect the water and sewer rates. So this is not a taxpayer issue then, this is really a consumer issue.
User.
No.
Is that well known in the community?
It is a
No,
consumer issue.
It's a consumer and a taxpayer.
Yeah, it would be
It's-
part of it.
It's both. I'm sorry.
No, it's Counselor, wait,
I know we're not supposed to address people during public speak, so I'll wait until he's done.
Okay. So,
Then I'll address it.
Counselor Whitney will give you her opinion.
I'm sorry,
I'm sorry, Counselor Whitney will give you her opinion on that question. Do you have any additional questions besides what you just said, or do you have any additional questions besides what you just said?
I'd like to hear it from the
Yeah, because we don't
commission.
have a motion, I can certainly bring up the finance director or anyone else here who could.
I'd like to see some
answer your
detail
question.
on that, try to give us some forward-looking projections in terms of what does this all mean for the future and how does it impact our
Yeah, I mean, my
water and
first,
sewer rates.
yeah, my first recommendation obviously would be to talk to the Department of Public Works. This is really tell you the details of everything, which I'm certainly not versed enough to discuss with you. Councilor Riss, did you have?
Uh, I was going to urge the citizen to actually attend the Board of Public Works meeting, which is happening right now. They have complete control over this subject. We approve bonding and borrowing, but how it's used and future projects and water rates is all under their control. And they're meeting right now on this.
6:30 downstairs.
Right downstairs.
Right now.
So, as much as we would like to answer all your questions, we don't have the knowledge or the authority to be able to tell you what we think. We can tell you what we think, but we don't have the authority to do any action on anything other than approving the
Isn't that where
bonding.
the public hearing should have been held then?
It is being held for the
downstairs.
bonding, but the rates are determined by the Board of Public Works.
Yes, I know that.
I'm just saying, we don't have any control over that.
This public hearing is strictly on this 1 million for this project. The public hearing downstairs is of the general overview of discussing rates. So if you want a broader picture to discuss the rates and more specific or general issues for Department of Public Works, you may be best served by going downstairs for downstairs meeting. This is directly relating to the appropriation of this 1 million for this project, for
Right,
this management plan.
so you folks are the ones who are really going to appropriate the money or appropriate,
What we're doing tonight is we're authorizing the mayor and the city to be able to borrow up to $1.1 million to complete this study and, everything that would go along with the study. That's all we're authorizing them to do. What the final cost comes, or how much it will affect the water rates, is going to be determined by the Board of Public Works and the Director of Public Works when he says, this is what we're going to need, given that, and maybe some capital improvements. I think there's some capital improvements down there also.
once all of this is completed, what happens to that money? Does it continue to impact the sewer and water rates, or do the sewer and water rates go back once this is all paid off? This is like a loan, right?
Yeah, I'll ask our finance director.
And once the loan is paid off, does,
Yeah, we'll ask our finance director.
Once
She
the
may have
bonding is
answer.
paid, but maybe the finance director can give you more specifics on that if you.
yes?
Melissa?
So the loan is a 20-year loan that's supported strictly by the rates. The rates also support operations, capital improvements, and all other activities of the enterprise department. It's operated in such a way that they're supposed to be able to pay for themselves on their rates and fees. So when the project is fully paid for in 20 years, then that will be not part of what they're trying to support with the rates. In 20 years, my guess is there'll be something else.
But over a period of 20 years, how long, how much are we going to be paying out per year in order to get it done?
It's just under $70,000 if we borrowed the full.
In interest?
No, in principal and interest to pay back the full loan at the rate of 2% provided by the state program.
That's if we borrow up to the full 1.1.
Correct.
There's
And
no,
it was like 68 something, you know, so
so-
roughly 70,000 a year for 20 years to pay back a loan if we borrowed it the full 1.1.
Great.
So you're talking
Thank you.
1.4 million.
I think it's 1.3 something at the end of the day, yeah, but rounding up, yes.
Thank you. Do you have any additional questions, or does that?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Maybe
Again, my recommendation, you may be able to learn quite a bit if you went downstairs with the Department of Public Works. They may be able to answer some of your questions for you down there.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Is there anyone else here from the public who would like to make a comment, or either public or city official, I mean, a comment relating to the appropriation? Okay, now being seen, Councilor Hagan, I would entertain a motion. If you're ready.
Okay, I make the following motion that the council approve the bonding and borrowing request, and it's a little bit lengthy, so bear with me. It is ordered that $1,100,000 is appropriated for the purpose of financing costs of an integrated water resource management plan, including without limitations all costs thereof as defined in Section 1 of Chapter 29C of the general laws, that to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the mayor, is authorized to borrow said amount and issue bonds or notes, therefore, under General Law, Chapter 44, Section 7, Subsection 1, or any other enabling legislation, and/or Chapter 29C of the general laws, that such bonds or notes shall be general obligations of the city unless the treasurer, with the approval of the mayor, determines that they should be issued as limited obligations and may be secured by local systems revenues as defined in Section 1 of Chapter 29C, that the treasurer, with the approval of the mayor, are authorized to borrow all or a portion of such amount from the Massachusetts Water Pollution Abatement Trust, called the Trust, established pursuant to General Law, Chapter 29C, and in connection therewith, to enter into a loan agreement and/or a security agreement with the Trust, and otherwise to contract with the Trust and the Department of Environmental Protection with respect to such loan and for any federal or state aid available for the project or for financing thereof, and the mayor is authorized to enter into a project regulatory agreement with the Department of Environmental Protection to expend all funds available for the project and to take any other action necessary to carry out the project.
Second. Okay, we motion a second for the bonding borrowing request of $1,100,000 funded by Enterprise for the Integrated Water Resource Management Plan. Any additional comments or questions? Okay, let's see. Councilor Glidden.
Yeah, I know that Mr. Roy has left, but he asked the question whether this was a consumer as opposed to a taxpayer issue, and I think this goes back to many years ago when we developed the enterprise funds, and the enterprise funds were developed and taken off the taxpayer rolls to help promote, first of all, people to start recognizing the fact that water is not free, and the services that come along with supplying water to the public is not free. And with that being said, that's why we created the Enterprises Fund. The Enterprise Fund is for the people that are using the water will now pay for the water, and then along with paying for the water that they're using, they are going to then now pay for the water, how to dispose of that water that they're using. Now, my grandfather had a farm, and we fell under the irrigation rules and things like that. So when we watered our vegetable gardens, which we were selling vegetables, we were paying the sewer rate on the watering of our vegetables. And as fair and unfair as that was, it's what we had to do. So with it being a consumer as opposed to a taxpayer system, it is a consumer issue as opposed to a taxpayer. And I've had people say, well, I'd rather have it on my taxes because then I can take it off my taxes. And once I explained to them, but you see, as a taxpayer, not everybody in Easthampton is a taxpayer. We have one of the biggest water users in Easthampton is Williston Northampton School. They are not a taxpayer. They are a non-exempt, non-paying tax entity. When we put the enterprise fund into place, they now have to pay for the water that they're using and the water that they're expending. That's one of the big reasons. That and all of the factories that we had on Pleasant Street that were our major water consumers, they again were, they were totally cognizant of the money that and the water they were using because they didn't have to pay for it. Once we put the water and sewer rates in, oh my goodness, now we're paying for this water? Well, now they're began to look at how to conserve and how to reuse the water wisely. So that's kind of in a nutshell on what's transpired in my life in Easthampton. And when I was a child, my mother used to get the water bill and she'd say, "This is the lowest bill I get for the house." And, and as before they passed away 4 or 5 years ago, my mother would say to me, "Oh my God." And I said, "Yeah, Ma, I remember when you used to say that was the lowest bill you got?" But it is all in the consumer as opposed to the tax. So he was absolutely right on that. But that's why we did it. So.
Great, thank you. Any additional comments? No. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes. Let me see, moving on, I believe we're ready for Councilor Ziegler, the easements, Pleasant Street Mills.
Thank you, Mr. President. On April 3rd, as I previously said, the property subcommittee met, and we also had present the city planner, Jessica Allen, who presented the blueprints for 2 easements that we were previously provided with. One is to amend the easement with the National Nonwovens and Charles Patterson to add water lines, and the other easement is with Western Mass Electric Company for adding power lines. And we, as a subcommittee, voted 3-0 to approve both easements.
Okay. Is there anyone here from the city who would like to address these easements? City Planner Allen?
Certainly here to answer any questions that you might have. But as you know, these are priority easements that we need now. The project's under construction. There are actually 2 easement agreements for the water lines. One is individually with National Nonwovens, and then there's another one with Charles Peterson. Those are adding an additional water easement to an existing sewer easement that's been in place since the 1960s. So the boundaries aren't changing, it's just adding additional language to allow us to have those easements for water lines. The water lines for this project are going to be running all the way down to Mechanic Street, and we need to have these easements in place in order to put that start point for the water line construction in that area. So those are 2 easements on that issue, and then there's 1 easement that's with the city and Western Mass Electric. As I expressed at the subcommittee meeting, this was an easement that was kind of presented to us late in the game by Western Mass Electric. They notified us just a few months ago that, yes, these easements are in fact going to be needed. And so what this easement does is essentially gives them the right to go in and fix their equipment, upgrade the equipment, provide whatever services they need. In case of a storm, it allows them to go in there and to access their materials. And so it's a pretty straightforward agreement. Both agreements have been reviewed, and the water easements were drafted by the city attorney. We spent many conference calls on the phone between the city attorney, myself, and the real estate division in Wamiko to hash out the language under the current agreement with Wamiko. So there's been a lot of time and energy spent on wordsmithing and crafting these agreements, and I believe they're ready to go. But I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for our planner concerning this project?
Are the agreements online?
Are they online?
The easements on?
No, they're not online.
Last week.
Oh, they were last week.
Any, Councilor Hagan?
Is there any cost, in other words, any payment to the landowners? This is just something that was done with prior easements. There was no cost there.
There's no.
I mean, the cost of a grant, obviously, of improving the easements, there's a cost in your grant, but
there's no money being transferred between the city and National Nonwovens and Bud Peterson. And I don't believe Wamiko has any either. And if it is, it's $1.
Any additional questions for the city planner? Councilor Whitty?
So now we're going to replace new water lines, right? So these will be taken off the
gonna be-
master plan, right?
Will be- yes,
They're gonna be all
exactly.
brand new.
I mean, this is exactly the type of,
Yeah.
this is exactly my point, is that, as the design has gone forward with this Mills project, it's been fascinating to watch Tom Newton, Jim Gracia, and Joe Pip making decisions in coordination with our design team and WMICO. We've got several utilities going on back there in a pretty small constrained area, and how everything works together, and how the water line connecting to Mechanic Street has been something on DPW's radar for a while, and there's just not been money to fund it. And this is an opportunity for them to get something in place that they've wanted for several years, I'd say even a decade. And so it's helping them reach that infrastructure goal for themselves, so.
I was just going to say, my husband and I took a ride down there Sunday, and we met the man that owns the bicycle shop, and he actually took us out back, and
In an active
he was
construction
wonderful.
zone.
I mean, he knew everything that was going on, and he's pointing things out to me, and that's the brewery, and this is that, and that's this, and that's what I call the hub, this big concrete thing in the middle of it, and I'm like, wow, I've learned more here than, well,
Sure.
okay, this is great.
Come down anytime, we can take you onto the active construction zone if you'd
Yeah,
like.
he was great.
Just give you a hard
He
hat
was
and some,
great, yeah.
and a vest. Welcome to come down anytime.
Any additional questions or comments for the city planner?
One more quick.
Councilor Hagan?
I know the rail trail was closed or is closed.
Still
and
closed.
Is there any timetable on that?
We are moving as quickly as possible. Right now, there's a slight hang-up for the water line that we're hoping to get addressed tomorrow and get resolved on Friday. Once that's resolved, the line down Mechanic Street can begin, and that should take a couple weeks for that installation to happen. We're hoping to be ahead of schedule. We're saying worst-case scenario, end of June. We're hoping that it's going to be earlier than that, but that's kind of our worst-case scenario that we want to put out there.
Additional questions, comments? Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else here from the city or the public who would like to comment relating to these easements? Okay, not seeing any. Councilor Ziegler.
Okay, I have two motions then. The first is, I move that the City Council authorize the mayor to execute an easement agreement with Western Massachusetts Electric Company and Verizon New England Incorporated in accordance with the easement documents made available at this meeting, with the location referenced as Putnam Court, Pleasant Street and Ferry Street, Easthampton, Hampshire County, Massachusetts, and as shown on the plans dated February 12, 2014.
Second.
Okay, motion and second for the just previous read easement agreement. Any additional discussion on that? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes.
Move the public hearings be
No,
closed.
we have
Second.
one more.
Okay, and the second
Oh, I
motion
apologize.
is that I move that the City Council authorize the mayor to execute easement agreements with Charles H. Patterson and National Nonwovens Incorporated in accordance with the two agreements made available at this meeting and as shown on the plans dated November 8th, 2013.
Second.
Okay, a motion and second for the previously read easement language. Any additional discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes. And that concludes?
That concludes.
Okay. Now, Councilor Riz.
I move the public hearings be closed.
Second.
Motion and second to close the public hearings. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes. We've gone through new business, so I'll make a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Motion and second adjourn. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstained. See you in May. Thank you.